My name is Thomas Vale, or at least it was. I'm a photographer. I had it all. A wife, Allison, friends, a career. And in one moment it was all taken away. All because of a single photograph. I have it. They want it. And they will do anything to get the negative.
You know, I was born in Flushing, New York, in Queens. I lived there till the ripe age of about 6 or 7 months when I suggested to my family that we should move to suburbia. And no, they moved me. We were plunked out of the city, a big mistake as I look back on it, to Teaneck, New Jersey, right across the Hudson River from Midtown Manhattan. I think having grown up in John Hughes land, so to speak, probably had a lot to do with Nowhere Man. And grew up in Teaneck, basically.
I had all kinds of jobs. I worked as a driller's helper on a drill rig for a couple of years. Just two guys on the rig drilling for coal. We get flown in by helicopter and work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 weeks at a stretch, and then get a week off. And did that for a couple of years to put myself through school. And worked on a Navy ship as a technician, and worked in a chemical factory, worked in a steel mill. Lots of real jobs.
Eventually found my way to the West Coast when I suddenly found myself out of work, which probably, by the way, was a blessing in disguise. You know, we sometimes get these kicks in the groin and we think this is terrible. It's a tragedy. And I only look back that, boy, if that hadn't happened, I could still be doing camera at roller derby. And, you know, not that there's anything wrong with it, it just wasn't what I came out here for. I don't know. I think I came out here to make film, but when I needed a job and I needed a way in, and my feeling was there was no production assistant way in. I didn't have the legs for it. I didn't have the short skirts. I didn't have the personality in that way. I could have done the job, but I mean, to get hired, I don't think I had the entry-level job thing. I would have been more than happy at the time to do it. And I was shooting blanks or wildly, you know, in terms of, I didn't know anybody. So it wasn't like, I wasn't in a program where people were saying, well, you could intern here or being a writer's assistant. There's nobody. I didn't have any contacts in the family. So it just occurred to me that since the age of Zip, I was always writing, even though that's not what I thought. Oh, I was always writing. And it was kind of like a big duh. Well, I might as well sit down and try to write. So that's what I did. Mike Sullivan from UPN confirms what I've often said. It was an amazing hurry up. And I wrote the script with a strong feeling for the feeling of the script, but it was one of those times, especially having done Stingray and kind of digging that, and forget that that didn't immediately precede Nowhere Man. I wanted a feel for it, a tone, and I didn't have time in my head. I was like, what does this look like? What does this sound like? Except I didn't know. I just wrote it and figured we're going to play catch up, you know. And when the script came out and they greenlit the pilot to shoot, and I connected with Toby, Toby came over my house and we were sitting around. Now, I don't know how much a director likes a writer producer saying this, talking about tone, but it is television after all, and it is different in television in terms of, it's not, you know, usually in features after the script's written, the writer is executed and everyone else goes and does whatever they want. But television's different. Toby came over and I started saying to him, I gotta be honest, I haven't figured out what this looks and feels like yet. So it certainly was an opportunity there to start talking about it with Toby. And I was just throwing out things. I don't even know what it sounds like yet. And just the wheels were turning. And I was just thinking about the beginning of the pilot in which nothing really happens.
You know, I read a bunch of scripts, as I did every year, and for pilots, and went out on a bunch of calls probably, and probably didn't get a bunch before I went in and met Larry and those guys. But I kind of, in the pilot, I kind of got it. I knew what I intended to do going in, you know, and oftentimes because you're not sure what they want, and you get in the room and you say, well, what are you after? And they go to themselves, like, oh, Christ, well, he doesn't have an idea what he's doing either, and neither do we really, so we're all fucked, so we'll wait for the next guy to come in. But I had a good idea of what I wanted to do, and I sensed what they were, I just sensed what they were after. Sometimes you can go into a room and you can feel the need they have for a specific vibe to come from you. right? You can just suss out, somehow you just suss out what it is they need.
I wanted it to be uncomfortable. And I think I just threw out as a for instance, and it stuck. Just like suddenly, someone drops something and it breaks. It was really there, it's composition. You know, it's almost like the composition of tension. The fun thing about the show for me, which was obviously in the long run frustrating for many people, is the fact that it was so open-ended. As much as you could say, Allison's good, Allison's bad, you could say it's about the photograph, it's not about the photograph, it is about the photograph. But in truth, as I've said, and I'm sure Hidden Agenda fundamentally has this at the base of it, is the fact that the photograph doesn't mean anything. It's a toy. It's a MacGuffin. It's what Hitchcock used to talk about. I mean, do we really care what everyone's after? We just have to know that's it. You know, we have to know that it's in that thing. In The Prisoner, it was, you know, tell us why you resigned. To me, and you know, I must admit, and I have admitted it before, this is not confession time, but when I saw the pilot, I realized I had gone too far in something in the short time I had, because even when I watched it, I thought, oh my goodness, this looks like you got to be able to find out all the answers to these questions. I mean, I felt I needed, again, we're talking about writing this thing in like, you know, a very short time. So, but I needed a MacGuffin. I needed something to care about. I needed the symbol, like in The Prisoner, of, you know, tell us why you resigned. And I think I set myself up for people looking at it, absolutely, and saying, well, explain this. But you know what? Maybe that, even though it was not intentional, maybe that made it more fun in the long run to eventually say, guys, you watch this as an episode. The Twilight Zone was an anthology. You know, it never connected except for the host who introduced it. I was basically, in my mind, doing an anthology with a similar theme.
You understand why you've been brought here?
I understand the circumstances under which I was brought here. It's the why I'm not too sure about.
You know, scripts would come in and they would bear no resemblance to anything you imagined that the show might be about. And so that got very frustrating. And other times they'd come in really strong. It was very uneven. And as I say, some of them, there were probably half a dozen that were really pretty good, and 10 that were fine, and another 10 that were, or 7 or whatever, that were just completely confounding.
I hope my men weren't too rough on you, Doctor. I'm sure you can appreciate the need for caution. We had to make sure that you were who we thought you were.
Turnabout was probably, if I think about it now, the only episode that kind of directly connected from a plot point of view into the next, and I don't know why it wasn't a concept. It was maybe because it felt to me that it felt like a more natural transition from the pilot. It may also have been nothing more interesting than the fact that we had 30 seconds to come up with episodes. Where do we start? What do we do? Because I mean, if you go with the fact that it didn't have an overall arc or something, Norman had nothing to accomplish but be a lot of fun and cool and be in the theme that it was in. But where do you go next? What do we do? Well, he took Dr. Bellamy's credit cards in the pilot. What if they got him and thought he was Dr. Bellamy? And that just seemed like, okay.
I can't tell you how enthusiastic we all are that you're here.
You know, let's go there. And, you know, usually episodes develop that way with a fascinating, provocative 1 or 2 liner, and then we just go, okay, but then what? Well, then you know, I know the theme of the show. I know that there's all these sort of little moral tales in it and psychological tales. So, okay, they think he's Dr. Bellamy. Well, it just started to flow and seem natural from there that, well, what if they asked him to be like Dr. Bellamy and to do unto someone as had been done unto him, and make it really worth his while? Because again, you know, since you're talking about a show which is so close to my own philosophy, and as Dr. Bellamy said, most people don't kick and fight too much before they give in. Will Tom? You know, how much does it take for any of us to be big, rotten, pain in the ass people.
The idea is, you know, coming up there and doing a show every week that's supposed to be set in some other part of the United States or the world. And it was, anthologically speaking, a totally different kind of episode than the one that was shot last week. In terms of the drama itself, every director that came up knew he had a certain freedom. And the parameters that he normally faced on series television, well, my character wouldn't do this, or this is the angle we use in the living room, or all of that kind of stuff, was out the window. He was making a little film, and he was bringing his own style to it. So we all liked that. We all liked that it was almost like a stage show, because every night you had to go out and do it.
And there weren't many people there was only one guy, main guy, me, to have to worry about having to bother with, or, you know. So, and I generally got along with, well, virtually everybody.
Everybody.
Right? And so it wasn't as though there's a director coming up and has to make friends with there's a whole dynamic between the 4 or 5 main actors. There's none of that, because it's just me, and everybody else would come in for the week, you know.
There's certainly great places to go with Tom and his situation, and because to me it's an endlessly fascinating concept of, you know, what is it like when you have to make the rules or let everyone else make them. And I find that fascinating.